The Trans Mountain Expansion, or TMX project, is a massive undertaking. It involves twinning an existing pipeline that carries oil from Alberta to the coast of British Columbia. This expansion will triple the pipeline's capacity, allowing it to transport 890,000 barrels of oil per day. The project has been in the works for years, and has faced numerous delays and controversies. Construction began in 2017, and the estimated cost at that time was $7.4 billion. However, the project has been plagued by cost overruns, and the final price tag is expected to be closer to $34 billion. This dramatic increase has fueled criticism from environmental groups and some economists, who argue that the project is no longer economically viable. Despite the challenges, the TMX pipeline is now operational. It began shipping oil in March of 2024, and the official opening ceremony took place on May 1, 2024. The completion of the pipeline marks a significant moment for Canada's energy sector, raising important questions about the country's environmental future. The TMX pipeline is a critical piece of infrastructure for Canada, transporting oil from the Alberta tar sands to the coast. This will allow Canada to access new markets for its oil and reduce its dependence on the United States as its primary customer. Proponents of the project argue that it will create jobs and boost the Canadian economy, while opponents counter that it will have devastating environmental consequences. The economic impact of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion is a subject of intense debate. Proponents argue that the project will be a boon for the Canadian economy. They point to the potential for job creation and increased revenue from oil exports. The Canadian government estimates that the project will add 0.25 percentage point to the country's GDP in the second quarter of 2024 alone. The TMX pipeline will create thousands of jobs during the construction phase and is expected to create hundreds of permanent jobs once it is operational. These jobs will be in a variety of sectors, including construction, manufacturing, and transportation. The project will also generate significant revenue for the Canadian government through taxes and royalties. However, critics argue that the economic benefits of the TMX pipeline have been overstated. They point to the project's ballooning costs and say that the pipeline is unlikely to be profitable. They also argue that the project will make Canada more reliant on fossil fuels at a time when the world is transitioning to cleaner sources of energy. The TMX pipeline is a risky investment. The price of oil is volatile, and there is no guarantee that the pipeline will be profitable. The project could also face legal challenges and delays, which could further increase costs and reduce its economic viability. The Canadian government's decision to purchase the Trans Mountain Pipeline in 2018 was a controversial one. The government argued that the purchase was necessary to ensure the project's completion, saying that the pipeline was in the national interest. The government's purchase came after Kinder Morgan, the original owner of the pipeline, threatened to cancel the project. Kinder Morgan cited uncertainty surrounding the regulatory process and opposition from environmental groups. The government saw the purchase as a way to provide certainty for investors and ensure that the project moved forward. Critics of the purchase argued that it was a bailout for a struggling company, saying that the government had overpaid for the pipeline. They also argued that the purchase put taxpayers' money at risk. The government defended the purchase, arguing that it was a strategic investment in Canada's energy future. The government's decision to purchase the TMX pipeline was a gamble, and it remains to be seen whether it will pay off. The project faces significant challenges, including legal challenges, opposition from Indigenous groups, and the potential for environmental damage. If the project is successful, it could generate significant revenue for the Canadian government and create jobs. However, if it fails, it could cost taxpayers billions of dollars. The voices of dissent against the Trans Mountain expansion are loud and clear. Environmentalists and Indigenous communities have been vocal in their opposition to the project. They argue that the pipeline poses a significant risk to the environment, including the potential for oil spills that could devastate local ecosystems. Indigenous groups have also raised concerns about the impact of the pipeline on their lands and way of life. They argue that the project violates their rights and threatens their cultural heritage. Environmentalists point to the broader issue of climate change, arguing that the world needs to transition away from fossil fuels, not invest in new infrastructure that supports their continued use. They believe that the TMX pipeline is a step in the wrong direction and that Canada should be focusing on developing renewable energy sources instead. The opposition to the TMX pipeline has led to numerous protests and legal challenges. Indigenous groups have taken their fight to the courts, arguing that they were not adequately consulted about the project. Environmentalists have also launched legal challenges, arguing that the approval process for the pipeline was flawed and did not adequately consider the environmental impact. Despite the opposition, the Canadian government has pushed forward with the project, arguing that it is in the national interest. The debate over the TMX pipeline is far from over, and it remains to be seen how it will ultimately be resolved.